Hello and welcome to my channel where I talk about books and other related stuff. I hope you are well and taking care of yourselves. In today's video, I'm going to talk about some of the authors, fiction authors whom I discovered last year and this year until now and who have become my absolute favorites. I have narrowed down the list to 6 authors. This is going to be an author recommendation video and I do hope you check out these authors. So yeah, let's get started with this video. The first author I'm going to discuss about is one I discovered last year and her name is Elif Shafak. The book that made me fall in love with her work was The 40 Rules of Love. This was the first book I read from her and it had such a huge impact on me that I vowed to read all of her other works. I also picked up another book of hers called 10 Minutes 38 Seconds in This Strange World in the same year. So Elif Shafak is Turkish. She is basically a British-Turkish author and The 40 Rules of Love is one of her well-known works. The first time I heard about it, I think it was years ago, but I did not know what it was about and I was not too curious to pick up this book. But then again, last year I think I read a great review about it on Bookstagram and then I came to know that this book featured Rumi, one of the greatest Sufi poets of all time, Rumi, and I was instantly curious to read the book because I'm really fascinated by Rumi's works, his poems, and so I picked this book up and this was more than just about the story of Rumi. So on one side, we are following the story of this literary agent, Ella, and in the modern times, and she is reviewing this book by an unknown author, and that book by that author is the story of Rumi. Like I said, it's not just about Rumi. One of the main characters the book focuses upon is Shams of Tabriz, who was the companion and teacher of Rumi, and until that point I did not know anything about Shams of Tabriz. He was the best character in the book. He became my favorite character in the book. His character was written so well. The 40 Rules of Love is kind of spiritual. It tells about the universal or spiritual concept of love, not just romantic love, but love as a whole, the spiritual essence of love. As per spirituality, love is so huge, it's so much larger than any other material thing in this world that it cannot be just fit into these boxes of categories. I really loved how this spiritual essence of love was captured in the book, and there are so many Sufi principles or Sufi philosophies that's being dealt in the book, and it's such a beautiful story. I also read another book of hers called this 10 Minutes 38 Seconds in This Strange World, and this was shortlisted for the PEN Booker Prize 2019, and contrary to the 40 Rules of Love, this is a much darker book. It has dark and harsh themes. It's also a really good book. I think more than the story, I like the writing of this book. I think her writing, her language shown in this book, it was so lyrical. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book. I have written a detailed review about this in my blog, and if you are interested to know more about the book, you can check out that link. I'll give it in the description below. This book basically focuses on the concept that human brain, it does not instantly die. Like, even after the person is dead, the brain activity, it kinds of goes on for 10 minutes and 38 seconds. So in the beginning of the book itself, we see a dead woman, and even though she is dead, her brain activity is going on for 10 minutes and 38 seconds. And within this 10 minutes and 38 seconds, her brain is kind of going through her memories and the stories being built around her memories, and we get to know about her life. This book was great as well, but I think due to the nature of the story of the 40 Rules of Love, I think it will always be my favorite book from hers. The next author that I'm going to talk about is a fantasy author whom I discovered last year. If you are a fantasy fan, I'm sure you have read his works or at least heard of him. He's a race in the fantasy genre, and he is Brandon Sanderson. So Brandon Sanderson, he writes these epic fantasies or adult fantasies. I mean, he is an expert in his own genre, and I read one of his most popular works of all time, which is the Mistborn trilogy. I don't know how he gets these ideas. Like, every aspect of his story is so amazing, like from the world building to the complex magic systems to the characterization and the mind-boggling plot and the mind-boggling plot twists. Every aspect of his stories are amazing. His books have everything that fantasy books need. The plot is very complex, but at the same time it's narrated in such a simplistic manner so as to make readers understand. And if you want a really amazing story to get lost into for hours, I would definitely recommend this author and his works. You'd literally forget about your surroundings while reading his books. Basically, if I have to say a few things about the story, then it tells us the story of this very brutal world which is ruled by this tyrant ruler for centuries. So this is a very brutal world where there are ash falls and there's this mist which kind of envelops the surroundings, and flowers have not bloomed in that world for centuries. There's this class division that's going on. There's this class of people called Ska whose lives are of daily torment, and then there's this nobility who stays in big mansions, or also known as keeps. And we follow our protagonist Kelsier, who is kind of carrying out this plan to overthrow this cruel ruler. This Kelsier, he is an expert in the art of allomancy. Now this is where the complex magic system comes in. So allomancy is a strange kind of magic. It deals with metals. There is a magical ability associated with each metal, and these metals can only be used or consumed by people who has that ability or who knows the art of allomancy. I do not want to go into much detail about it because it would sound very weird and confusing, but once you read the book, if you read the story, you will get the gist, you will understand everything. I have another book by him which is a part of a very long series. I think it's going to be a series of 10 books. I have the first book and I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning to do it soon. But this is also a very great series by him. Like, everyone has so much praises for the book, but it's not been completed yet. The fourth book is out, and I would not recommend to start with this because it's very complex, and also this book and Mistborn trilogy and some of his other books are part of this greater universe called Cosmere, and there are certain lists in the internet on how you should proceed with Cosmere, like which books you have to read first. There's so many people who have started the Cosmere journey with the Mistborn trilogy, and I'm one of them. And personally, I'd recommend that series first. And if you do not want to get into this complex Cosmere stuff, and if you just want to read only one work by him, then I would definitely recommend the Mistborn trilogy. To understand Mistborn, you do not have to read some other books that's written before the Mistborn trilogy. You can directly go into the story, into this trilogy, and you can enjoy the story as a singular thing. You do not have to connect it with Cosmere. Highly recommend the Mistborn trilogy, and I'd highly recommend the author. The third author whom I'm going to talk about is a classic author, and she is one of the most well-loved authors of all time, and she is Jane Austen. The book that obviously made me fall in love with her work is Pride and Prejudice. It's no surprise here. It's one of our most well-loved works of all time. I'm late into reading this work because most people I know who have read this book so much earlier in their life, and I also haven't watched any of the adaptations. There are so many adaptations. How many of them are there? I'm not sure, but I know about this, the latest adaptation, the 2005 adaptation, which is also on Netflix, but I haven't watched that one as well. I really, really like Pride and Prejudice. It's wonderful how people can connect to this piece of literature from the 1800s and can relate to it so much even now. Jane Austen fans would definitely agree with me when I say that this book, more specifically, it's known as a love story, but it's so much more than that. The way Jane Austen talks about society, the way she represents the facets of the society, she does it in such a clever way. There's so much humor in her writing and so much sarcasm. It shows that irrespective of the place or the country or even the timeline, there are certain aspects of the society which are universal. You'd meet these certain kind of people everywhere in the society, no matter what the place is. If it's a English society, Jane Austen English society, or even it's Indian society, or even it's 1800, or even it's 2021. there are certain kinds of people or you would meet everywhere. And I don't think I have to go into details about Pride and Prejudice because so many people have read it and loved it. In case of Jane Austen, I have read only one book. But by reading that book, I can know that I would love her other works as well. I have another book of hers, Persuasion, with me right now in paperback. And yeah, I'm planning to read that one as well. So many people seem to love that after Pride and Prejudice. And yeah, let's see how my Jane Austen journey goes. The next author I'm going to talk about is a Japanese contemporary author, and her name is Yoko Ogawa. And the book that I first read from her was The Housekeeper and the Professor, which I read this year, and I absolutely fell in love with the story. It has so much warmth, and at the same time it's so touching. It tells the story of this professor who has a major memory problem. His memory only lasts for 80 seconds. Like after 80 seconds he forgets everything and he has to start anew. And so when this housekeeper is assigned to his house, she has to be introduced to him every single day, because after 80 minutes has passed he forgets everything. What's the most amazing thing about this professor, who was a former maths professor, who is still a maths genius, and he, even after his major memory problems, he has so much love for the subject. And this maths, it kind of becomes a language for him. Through maths, he is able to communicate with the housekeeper and her son, who he has also lovingly nicknamed as Root, the square root symbol. And the three of them form such a beautiful bonding, and we see their bonding evolve throughout the story. Despite all the difficult things or the difficult moments that the professor has to go through, the bonding that evolves, it's so touching and it's so emotional at so many parts as well, and it also has so much warmth. I would definitely recommend the story. Yoko Ogawa's writing is very simple and the narration style is really good. She writes in Japanese. Her works are translated works. I also read another book called The Memory Police by her this year, and contrary to The Housekeeper and the Professor, this is a dark book. This has a dark theme. It is a dystopian book. It talks about this island where things are disappearing one at a time. Here also the narration style was really good. Like I said, Yoko Ogawa's narration is very beautiful and I like the narration, but overall the story did not have a huge impact on me. But I'm not dissuading you from reading this book. I mean, so many people also love this book so much. It was just a personal thing. I could not connect much with the story, but I did love the narration. So yeah, you can check out that one as well. But from my side, I would recommend The Housekeeper and the Professor. It was a 5-star read for me. The next author that I'm going to talk about is an author who has become so much popular in this recent year. He is Fredrik Backman. Yeah, I'm sure you have heard or read A Man Called Ove, and this was his first book. It became an instant bestseller. The best thing about Fredrik Backman is that he uses both the elements of humor and sadness, and he combines these elements so well that the humor element, it kind of balances out the emotional aspects or the sadness in the book. And yeah, there are so many moments in his books that you would laugh, and there are so many moments where you would feel emotional. If you want to start with Fredrik Backman, I would definitely recommend A Man Called Ove, because it was his first book, and also so many people love this book so much. It tells the story about this grumpy old man who's kind of obsessed with rules and regulations. He's so rigid in his ways, and he gets annoyed easily. He gets annoyed with his neighbors, and he has kind of this military routine, and he does not like any diversion from his routine. But as we go along the story, we kind of fall in love with his character. We kind of know about his past. His past is kind of tragic. We kind of form an emotional connection with this grumpy man. Like I said, in this book also you will laugh so much, and at the same time there are parts where you will feel emotional about Ove. Now his books I would also recommend to new readers. For people who are new to fiction, can definitely start with his works, because his writing is so simple and it's so engaging at the same time. I would definitely recommend to people to start with A Man Called Ove, but his other books are really good as well. I read another of his book, Anxious People, which was also released last year, and I liked that one as well. It was about a strange robbery and a hostess situation, and here also there are so many funny moments and emotional moments as well. The last but not the least author I'm going to discuss about is an absolute favorite. Like, I get so emotional just like thinking about his work or thinking about his book or the characters that he created. And his work has left such a personal impact on me, and I feel so lucky to have finally read his works. And he is a classic fantasy author, and he's none other than J.R.R Tolkien, the author of this epic The Lord of the Rings. I don't know what to say about this book because there are so many emotions when it comes to this book. And this book is a home to me. It's one of those books that I would come back to again and again and reach out to these characters who feel like family, who feel like friends. Like, there are so many books that we love, but from amongst those books also there are those few books that becomes this safe haven, that becomes this place that we would want to go and visit again and again and be there for a long stretch of time. This is that book that leaves so much emotional impact on a person. So many people have either they have read the books or watched the movies, which are also great as well, as so I have heard. Like, if I talk about the Lord of the Rings fandom as a whole, it would comprise of all the people who have either read the book or have seen the movies or have done both. But if I just have to consider the people who love the book, it alone is such a huge fandom, and I'm finally a part of this fandom, and I'm so happy to be here. Tolkien's fandom is huge, and I have always heard a lot about Tolkien. I have always wanted to know why people love The Lord of the Rings or Tolkien so much. There are so many things to love about this book. There's this adventure going on. There's this amazing plot. There are so many creatures in his books. The way he envisioned this world called Middle-earth, the way he created this world, and the way he narrated about this world, and the way he created all these fantastical and magical creatures. But at the core of this book, at the heart of it, there are these wonderful elements of friendship, bravery, and sacrifice. And these elements give a whole new dimension to the story. It gives so much gravity to the story. Some of the most greatest examples of sacrifice and friendship and bravery is in this book. And like, who can forget Sam Gangi? There's so many great characters. Like, besides the hobbits are kind of this, they're central to the story, but besides the hobbits there are so many other wonderful creatures as well. It's one of the most greatest works of imaginative fiction. The imagination, the vision that he had of this world, the world he created, and the characters that he created, they give so much to the readers. And even though I'm late into this adventure, I think this book it's for all ages. Like, anyone can read this book at any point of time and love it. And also, I'd like to mention here that so many people call it a trilogy, but actually it's not. It's just one book. I mean, Tolkien never meant it to be a trilogy. He wrote this whole book, and it was separately published in 3 parts, and the movies are also made separately, so people confuse it for a trilogy, but it's just one book. And I read the prequel of this book, The Hobbit, last year, and I absolutely fell in love with the characters and definitely wanted to continue the journey of Middle-earth, and that's why I picked up Lord of the Rings this year. And it was such a great experience reading this amazing piece of creation. And people can derive so much from this book, but yeah, there are people who are kind of intimidated by the size, and that's why they do not want to read this book because it takes a huge amount of time. But personally, for me, like, I could instantly connect with the story and the characters, and like every single page, every single line that I read was worth my time. But yeah, there are people who cannot like get past of the first few parts of the book because it's kind of, they feel it kind of slow. It is slow in some places because Tolkien's writing is so descriptive. He describes a lot, he narrates a lot. His narration style is very descriptive. Like, personally, it worked for me, but it might not work for everyone. And also, the language is kind of old English. That also kind of turns people off. Tolkien, he's a classic fantasy author. I mean, so many modern fantasy authors are and were inspired by Tolkien. As an epic fantasy tale, it obviously has dark elements, so many dark elements. But despite the dark elements, there's so much innocence that's retained in the story, because obviously we have these amazing hobbits as the central characters, and they are some of the most innocent and cutest creatures that I have ever read about. I have also written a detailed essay regarding my feelings about The Lord of the Rings, and if you are interested to check it out, I would definitely provide the link in the description. I also have certain honorary mentions. So the first author I'm going to talk about is Kazuo Ishiguro. Now I do not have to critique this author. He's a wonderful author, but personally his works, I like those works, but they were not 5-star books for me. I read The Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go. I really like those two books, but I think I gave them 4 stars. And another author I'd like to mention, from whom I have read just one book, she is Anne Patchett, and I read The Dutch House by her, and it was such a really wonderful story. She knows how to write stories, engaging stories, and she writes in a very simple manner. So The Dutch House told the story of these 2 siblings who lives in this great mansion type house called the Dutch House, and one day they're kind of ousted or thrown away from their own houses by their stepmother, and we kind of follow the lives of these 2 siblings. And the last honorary mention is Sayaka Murata. Now I read her book The Convenience Store Women, and I really liked her narration, and I give it 4 stars, and I think I would want to explore more of her works. So that was all for today's video. I hope you liked my suggestions, and I do hope you check out these authors if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll come back with another video very soon. Until then, do take care of yourselves and have a great evening, have a great afternoon, have a great night, and yeah, see you all very soon with another video. So yeah, goodbye and do take care.